Hello everyone and welcome to today's lesson. Today we're going to be going through unit conversions, so SI and Imperial. Now on the first page we're going to be staying within the same system of measurement. So we're going to be staying in SI, and then when we're working with Imperial we're going to be staying within Imperial. So at the top here we have all the different conversions between SI, and then at the right we have the different conversions between Imperial. So for example, when we're looking at 1 kilometer, it is equal to 1,000 meters, or 1 kilometer is equal to 100,000 centimeters, and so on as it goes down. On the right side we have 1 mile is equal to 1,760 yards. 1 mile is equal to 5,280 feet, and so on. So let's put this into practice here. I'm going to leave some of them blank for you to complete, and then I'm going to do some as an example for you. When we're looking at 3 meters, and we're wanting to go into centimeters, we can go back to our reference sheet at the top, where 1 meter equals 100 centimeters. What that means is we need to take 3 meters and multiply it by 100 to get our total amount of centimeters. 3 times 100 gives us 300 centimeters. Going over to B, we have 5.2 kilometers, and we want to go into meters. If we go back to the top, just going to get rid of all this highlighting here. We're going from kilometers to meters, so 1 kilometer equals 1,000 meters. So we're taking 5.2 kilometers and we're multiplying it by 1,000, and this is giving us 5,200 meters. If we're going from 67 millimeters into centimeters, well, we want to look at millimeters into centimeters. Well, we have here centimeters to millimeters. If we're going from centimeters to millimeters, we are multiplying by 10. But if we're going from this, so millimeters to centimeters, we're dividing by 10. So whatever we have, if we're going from left to right, we're multiplying, and if we're going from right to left, we're dividing. This would be the same on this side. If we're going left to right, we're multiplying, and if we're going right to left, we're dividing. So in this situation, we want to go from millimeters into centimeters, meaning we need to divide by 10, which will give us 6.7 centimeters. We'll do one more example, and then I'm going to leave the rest for you to complete. Once you've completed them, make sure you're checking the class OneNote to see that you've got them correct. In this example, we're going from 250 centimeters into meters. Well, there's 100 centimeters in a meter, meaning we're going to have to divide by 100, which will give us 2.54. Now, I've noticed that we've only done SI so far, but it follows the exact same rules for Imperial. So I'll do one Imperial for us just so you have an example of it. When we have 63 feet and we're going into yards, well, we want to go from yards to feet. So 1 yard is 3 feet, meaning if we have feet to yards, we're going this way, meaning we're dividing. So we're going to be taking 63 divided by 3, which will give us 21 yards. For example 2, we're looking at adding and subtracting the following. The most important thing that we need to think about is what are we trying to end up with? If we're trying to end up with centimeters, we need to convert all of the units that are not centimeters into centimeters so that we're able to add or subtract them. The first one here, we have 2 meters, meaning that we need to multiply this by 100, which will give us 200 centimeters. The next part, we have 65 centimeters, and the last part, we have 90 millimeters. Well, we need to divide it by 10, because there's 10 millimeters in a centimeter, and that'll give us 9 centimeters. So now we have 200 plus 65 plus 9, which will give us 274 centimeters. Let's jump down and do example D. So we're looking at 4 feet and 34 inches, and we're trying to end up with inches. That means we need to convert our feet into inches. Well, there is 12 inches in a foot, so we're taking the 4 feet, multiplying it by 12, which will give us 48 inches. So we'll have 48 inches plus 34 inches, giving us a total of 82 inches. Now, that's an example of both types of systems of measurement, and I want you to complete B, C, and E on your own. On the next page, we're looking at converting between the systems of measurement. So we're going from Imperial to SI, or we'll be going from SI to Imperial. Now, if we are going from Imperial to SI, we're going to be multiplying, and if we're going from SI to Imperial, we are going to be dividing. The way that the chart is set up for us, it's always going from one measure of Imperial into a certain amount of SI. So if it is set up this way, we can always follow that if we're going from left to right, we're multiplying, and if we're going from right to left, we're dividing. Now let's see what this looks like. If we're going with 3 meters and we want to figure out how many yards we have, first thing we need to do is find out meters and yards. Well, here we have 1 yard equals 0.9 meters, meaning that we're going to have 3 meters turning into yards, so we want to divide by 0.9 to get our total number of yards. So dividing by 0.9 will give us 3.3 yards. Now, another way of looking at this is setting up our cross multiplication. The most important part is that you stay consistent when you are doing that. So what that means is if meters are on the top, they have to stay on the top. If yards are on the bottom, they have to stay on the bottom. So if we set this up with 1 yard, because we know that is equal to 0.9 meters, we do yards on top and 0.9 meters on the bottom is equal to, now we're trying to figure out the number of yards, and we have 3 meters, so we can now have our cross multiplication set up where we're going to multiply the 3 and the 1, and then we're going to divide it by the 0.9. So essentially, it's what we did here, but we didn't set up our cross multiplication. Let's do another example to make sense of this. For B, we have 5 feet, and we're trying to figure out the number of meters that we have. So if we have 5 feet, and we want to go from feet to meters, well, 1 foot equals 0.3 meters. Now, let's go with our meters on top. So our 0.3 meters on top over our 1 foot is equal to our unknown for our meters over our 5 feet that we know. Now we've set up our cross multiplication where we're going to multiply the 5 by 0.3 and then we divide it by 1, which would be the same. Now if we followed what we had up here, we were going from feet to meters, so we're multiplying. So either way would work in this instant. And we'll finish off the question by doing 5 multiplied by 0.3, which would give us 1.5. If we're looking at C now, we have 67 millimeters and we're going into inches. So inches and millimeters, 1 inch equals 254 millimeters. Sorry, that should be 25.4 millimeters, meaning that you're going to have 1 inch over 25.4 millimeters is equal to our unknown for inches over 67 millimeters. So we're staying consistent with our millimeters on the bottom, which will have 67 multiplied by 1 divided by 25.4, which will get us 2.6. For D, we have 254 miles, and we're trying to figure out kilometers. Now, 1 mile equals 1.64 kilometers, so we have an unknown of kilometers, so we're going to go with kilometers on top. So 1.6 kilometers is equal to 1 mile, and then we have our unknown kilometers over our 254 miles. Our cross multiplication is set up. We can do our 1.6 multiplied by 254, and then we're dividing it by 1, which doesn't change anything. So we get 406.4 kilometers. I'm going to leave these last 4 practice questions for you to do, and then I want you to check your answers in the OneNote when you're done. In example 4, Yuri was hired to install a chandelier in the foyer of a home with 9-foot ceilings. So that's important information, so I'm going to underline the 9-foot ceilings. The homeowner is 180 centimeters tall and cannot decide on the length of the chandelier that they wish to hang. What are some possible lengths the chandelier is? Now, essentially what our problem is we want to figure out what the maximum height is. If this person is 180 centimeters tall, well, we need to figure out what the possible length from here to here is that we can have without them hitting their head on the chandelier. Now, we know that the top to the bottom is 9 feet. So in order to figure out our unknown, we have to first figure out what the height of our person is in the same unit of measure as the 9 feet. So we can convert the 180 centimeters into feet and then subtract that from 9 feet to figure out the total distance that we have for head clearance. So if we take 1 foot over 30 centimeters, which is our correct ratio, equal to our unknown feet that we're trying to figure out over our 180 centimeters. We have our cross multiplication set up, and we can do 180 multiplied by 1, which is still 180, divided by 30, which gives us 6 feet. Now with that 6 feet, we can do 9 feet, subtract 6 feet, to figure out that 3 feet is the total clearance that they have. So they could go from 0 to 3 feet as our possible lengths for the chandelier. So 0 would be right on the ceiling, and 3 feet would be just above the person's head. Now, part B says, what factors should the homeowner consider before deciding on the length of the chandelier? Well, not everybody wants to have their chandelier hanging just above the height of their head, so that could be one factor. You don't want it just above your head. And another factor would be that if somebody else who comes into the house who's taller than 6 feet, they're going to hit their head on that chandelier. So that would be something else that they'd like to consider. That they don't want it just above their head, and they have to think about the height of other guests who are going to come into the home. For example 5, it says, the doorway to Jay's office is 3 feet wide. He wishes to purchase a desk that is 80 centimeters wide. Can the desk pass through the doorway? Now, we have the same type of problem where we have to convert between centimeters and feet. If we are going towards feet, what we can go by is 1 foot is equal to 30 centimeters. So we can set up our cross multiplication now, and we want to figure out the number of feet because we know 80 centimeters. Setting up our cross multiplication, we do 80 multiplied by 1, which is still 80, and divide it by 30, so we get an answer of 2.7 feet. Now, 2.7 feet is less than 3 feet, and the doorway is 3 feet wide, meaning we will be able to pass the desk through the doorway. Our final answer would be yes, it can pass through the doorway. Now that completes the lesson for today. Make sure you use the references at the top of each page to help you complete these lessons, and also make sure that you're completing the work booklet as well.